Dear Judge Berman, I come forward to you today in disdain, disgust, and fear about how the United States of America's DOJ has handled the promise to release the Epstein files. Out of respect for the court, I will keep this short, to the point, and as direct as possible. I want to talk to you about that letter lodged with a federal court in the Southern District of New York from one of Epstein's victims, and Ghislaine's victims, who chose to remain anonymous for purposes of posting that to the docket. And then we've heard from the law firm Boies, Schiller, Flexner, which represented a lot of victims in the Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein case. And on behalf of the victims, they've written how the Trump DOJ has engaged in a cowardly abdication of its duties to protect victims in cases like this in favor of helping cover up the sex trafficking ring for Epstein, and to protect and to provide perks and benefits to Ghislaine Maxwell. So let me just show you what's being lodged, and then I want to talk about what is taking place with Ghislaine Maxwell's filing in the Southern District of New York, where she's saying, don't release grand jury testimony. We've got developments there. Ghislaine Maxwell's deposition was postponed essentially indefinitely by the MAGA Republicans in Congress, saying, we'll just wait until after the Supreme Court rules on her case. And then on Tuesday, Donald Trump gave a bizarre press conference that I've covered in other videos, where he said, look, the reason I have my former criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, speak there may be people mentioned in these files who need to be protected, who may not be looked at as the best way if it's released. And we just have to protect those people. What are you talking about, man? Let's protect the victims and release the files. So going back to that first letter, here is what the victim one wrote. I regrettably feel the need to come forward and shed some light on the government's motion to unseal transcripts, documents, and exhibits from the case that was never tried. Sad to say, for the victims, we never got our day in court regarding Jeffrey Epstein, because he allegedly died by suicide. Apparently, Epstein killed himself under whose watch? Oh, was it Trump's DOJ? Interesting. Although I am for complete and utter transparency in this case, we deserve transparency from our own government, the agencies that were supposed to be there to protect us victims. And guess what? They utterly and completely failed us. Unfortunately, with their disregard for the victims, I feel it's imperative to write this letter to the court. It then goes on to say how the victim here wants to remain anonymous. And then it goes on to say they would rather ask a convicted, imprisoned sex trafficker, abuser for information than talk to us, the victims. So there was that letter that was posted. Then you had the Boies Schiller letter to Judge Berman and Judge Engelmayer. We write on behalf of Annie Farmer in response to the belated notice that we received from the DOJ, advising the court is seeking letters on behalf of victims, setting out their positions on the proposed disclosures. It goes on to say, Miss Farmer is a survivor of Epstein and Maxwell's crimes and testified at Maxwell's trial, while the undersigned counsel has at various times represented hundreds of victims of Epstein and Maxwell. Aside from Ms. Farmer, the Department of Justice's notice did not identify specific victims whose names, likeness, or information may be subjected to disclosure. It goes on to say, by the government's admission, over 1,000 victims suffered from Epstein and Maxwell's actions. To date, however, the combined forces of our country's law enforcement agencies have only ever arrested these two individuals in connection with the crimes that were committed. And then it goes on to talk about this has been a total abdication of the responsibilities owed to victims in cases like this. A powerful letter from Boies Schiller. So let me bring in right now Harry Litman. Harry, we're hearing from the victims now, who we should have heard from way before there was any meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell, any grant of immunity, any request to release grand jury testimony. Victims' rights, as you know, as a former federal prosecutor that led the Western District of Pennsylvania and at Maine Justice, victims' rights are paramount in any case, especially sex trafficking cases, because of the sensitivity and the fact that victims can be re-victimized in situations like this if it's not handled with care and tact. And we're now hearing from the victims that what Trump's DOJ is doing is causing them severe emotional distress and agony. What do you make all of it and the other developments we're learning about in Ghislaine Maxwell's filings and her quest to get a pardon?
Man, oh man, what a tangled web, Ben. So let's start with the victims. First, you're right. In particular, DOJ takes stock of the fact, and it is a really sad fact that we're seeing play out, that victims who, of underage trafficking really do keep it with them forever. We don't need to look any farther than the suicide of George Giuffre, who was one of the primary victims here. Now, point two, they are 100% right, and the DOJ is completely, and the way I wrote it in my Substack was strange, try, indefensible. Blanche had no business, zero business, not a business, going down to Florida to speak with Maxwell for a couple days. He's in the Department of Justice. He does things ostensibly in the public interest and only in the public interest. And they're 100% right. What is he doing in giving her cushier digs, or however you want to do it? Why is the Department of Justice, which sometimes gives benefits to witnesses because they benefit the public interest, like bringing another case, this is instead doing a solid, as best we can tell, and hoping that she'll do more for Donald Trump in his personal political capacity to try to blunt a scandal. And you need look no further than, as you say, the now two different explanations from Trump. What he first said is, I guess, Blanche just, wanted to sort of see what was going on and what's out there. You're damn right he did. In other words, protecting your behind and seeing what was out there and how she could harm you. Nothing to do with the job description of a deputy attorney general. And now this latest, it's in order to protect the victims, is a total crock. Any disclosure under any circumstances would always excise the names of the victims. Anybody knows that their privacy would be protected, and that's got nothing to do with Blanche's ultra vires trip down to Florida. Then where Maxwell was being imprisoned till they moved her to cushier digs in Texas. The main thing now, but let's just move to some of the things you said about Maxwell herself, who obviously wants to have a leg up and get some consideration and against this 20-year sentence. But she has said also, you can't release this stuff. But what they're talking about here, it matters to Maxwell. This is all the things in the grand jury that indicted Maxwell. And those were, by the way, just law enforcement agents. You know how this works, Ben, but for some listeners, you're allowed to use hearsay in the grand jury. So the simplest way, you don't get any trouble, you put in an FBI agent who says, well, so-and-so told me this, then that, then the third, and then you ask the grand jury to vote an indictment. But those people, unless they're going to testify at trial, you don't get their testimony in the grand jury. And here, Maxwell did not. She said she did not. She asked for it. DOJ wouldn't give it to her. And she says, not knowing what's there, I've got to oppose their motion to release it. Now, let me say that motion to release it from her trial has basically zero to do with what the victims feel they need, with what MAGA is clamoring for, with what the House Oversight Committee is now up in arms about. That's the motherlode of actual Epstein stuff that the Federal Bureau of Investigation collected 15 years before the trial. And it's just a deceptive maneuver by the department, and Judge Engelmeyer and Judge Berman both already have indicated you can't release grand jury materials because there's a public interest. What are you talking about? The rules don't specify that. And even in the Second Circuit, which is a little more loosey-goosey, think about it. If you could just say, oh, the public interest is strong here, that would mean no, grand jury protections in any sort of big, high-profile case. So for the victims, that's what they're focused on in terms of that motion doesn't really matter so much. But in terms of the basic complaint, you assholes, we're being victimized every day in the paper, and you, Deputy Attorney General, with no lookout, go down to Florida and just start giving out favors to the remaining living perpetrator of our victim of terrible things that happened to us. You're just thinking about her, trying to do her favors so that you can try to basically position Donald Trump politically in the best way you can. That is just scummy, as I say, way outside the job description of what anybody at DOJ, especially a Deputy Attorney General, ought to be doing.
The people release the Epstein files. Trump, you want me to release the sex trafficker? Yeah. No, the Epstein files. Trump, what'd you say? You want me not to release the files? It's like, what are you talking about here? I mean, the purpose of this is to help victims and to stop the bad guys. That Donald Trump turned release the Epstein files into let's make Ghislaine Maxwell queen for a day and treat her better than, frankly, he treats like the Prime Minister of Canada or the president of Brazil or whatever, I mean, is the most insulting thing imaginable to the victims, to our country's dignity. The fact that he rushed the DOJ to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell quicker than FEMA addresses national emergencies, like that's not okay. And people are looking at this and saying, what are you doing? Like what? Like, it's not like people are falling for it. Like, and they're like, yes, Ghislaine, no one's asked for anything Ghislaine related. Why? We don't care. She's convicted we just don't want her to be pardoned. That's the unthinkable. I don't even care what's in that recording with her because she's a liar, right? I mean, she's the sex trafficker.
Trying to get out of a 20-year sentence. Yeah, 100% right. And, they really have neglected. They just haven't thought about the victims before. And of course, they're so compelling when they come forward because it's just true. You get, groomed and used when you're a 14-year-old, pretty girl. And it in so many cases just really destroys you for life. And they are the human cost out there of Maxwell, who's still alive, and Epstein. And nobody gives or at least now, maybe they'll try for political reasons, but nobody has taken half a second to think about their interests. And that's one of the reasons why this is continuing to be sticky, and he's having all kinds of trouble trying to get out from under it.
Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds podcast, and Talking Feds Substack. Thanks for joining us. As always, everybody subscribe to all of Harry Litman's channels. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Ben. Good to see you.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.